Hey beautiful people, I'm Jennifer Kenny and I'm here today to talk to you about how to tell your boss you don't feel supported. What would happen if you didn't have to say that? What would happen if you could have this conversation without feeling whiny and needy? And what would happen if you could have this conversation without getting fired? By the end of this video, I want to be able to show you how to have these kind of difficult conversations face to face, adult to adult, in a way that gives you the results you're looking for without you having to sweat breaks. I've talked in a couple of my other videos. I also talk about it in my best-selling book, The Innovation Mindset. But what I want to talk to you about today is the idea of breakdowns. Breakdowns are moments when our current practices no longer serve us. So if you feel like your boss is not supporting you, you've got a breakdown. Now, there's a couple of different ways that you can deal with a breakdown. You can spiral off into, woe is me, my boss is a jerk, I hate this place, I never want to work here again, I don't trust them, what am I supposed to do with this? Or alternatively, you can see this as an opportunity for you to be able to practice having difficult conversations. We all have to have difficult conversations throughout our entire lives. This is a really good example of one that you need to have, and let me show you how to be able to have it in a way that makes it a lot less difficult. So if I'm driving along on the freeway and my car breaks down and all of a sudden my wheels are blown out and I've pulled over to the side, hopefully not gotten run over by a large truck, I've pulled over to the side and I recognize that I have a breakdown. Now I have a couple of options when I have a breakdown. I can either get out my cell phone and call AAA, or I can call one of the local garages, or I can have an absolute fit and I can blame the car company, the road, the tires, anyone who had anything to do with my car in the last 6 months. The most effective one is probably going to be getting on your cell phone and calling AAA. When you think about how you want to deal with this situation with your boss, I beg of you to start thinking about it in terms of a breakdown. Here's the important thing to think about with breakdowns. Breakdowns are an inevitable part of life. You cannot drive a car for more than a couple of years in any country in the world without experiencing a breakdown of some sort. Breakdowns are an inevitable part of just being alive. So breakdowns aren't your fault or someone else's fault. They just randomly happen. So think about what's going on with your boss as not your boss's fault and not your fault, but stuff that just randomly happens. Now, it may be that your boss has consistently not supported you over a period of, say, 6 months. It may be that your boss has consistently not supported anyone on the team over a period of about 6 months. The important thing to see in here is that this is not your fault and it's not your boss's fault. It is a breakdown that you can actually have a conversation around as if it's a third party thing that's happening, and you can point to it and go, this isn't working, what are we going to do to begin to fix this? One of the things I learned when I started practicing this idea of breakdowns, I learned early on that if I was going to declare a breakdown, that meant that I was going into the person and I was offering to help them fix the breakdown no matter what it was. So if I saw someone behaving ridiculously, stupidly, badly, not supporting other people, and I could see it going on but it wasn't impacting me, I needed to be able to go in and have a conversation with them and offer to help them fix it. So whenever you're getting ready to declare a breakdown, just recognize that you're offering to help the person fix it, because you're acknowledging that it's not their fault, it's not your fault, it's something that's randomly happening. So let's go back to your boss that isn't supporting you. If your boss isn't supporting you, there's a fairly good chance that it's because they don't know how to. If your boss isn't supporting you and isn't supporting anyone else on their team, it is because they don't know how to. So then the question is, what kind of conversation are you going to have with them, and what does the breakdown actually look like? Now, you have a couple of options here. You can either go to HR and say to them, hey, my boss isn't supporting me, and by the way, I've spoken to 6 other people on our team, they all report to him as well, and by the way, he isn't able to support any of them either. Now you've got a leadership development problem. The other thing is, if it's a conversation that you think that you can handle yourself, and you don't want to go around behind your boss's back and talk to HR, which you can do. I'm not saying that you shouldn't ever consider doing that. If it's a conversation that you think that you can handle yourself, then what you're doing is you're going in and you're going, hey, look, I would love to talk to you about your performance expectations for me and for some of the other team members as well. Now, I don't usually recommend to people that they talk on behalf of other people, but in this particular case, it's useful to let your boss know that this is kind of something that is not just you. So the conversation might look like, hey, I see that there's something happening that I want to understand your expectations for me and for the rest of the team. And the boss will either not have expectations or not be ready to talk about them. If they're not ready to talk about them, then you're having a conversation that says, I think the lack of expectations is causing a number of breakdowns. I know it's causing a number of breakdowns with me, and I believe it's causing a number of breakdowns with some of the other team members as well. Do you think that's something that you'd be willing to have a conversation around, or how do you articulate your expectations for the team and how do we talk about them together? If at that point your boss says, absolutely something I don't want to talk about, then you've done everything in your power to begin to have that conversation with them, and that's when you go and ask for outside help. Chances are they will be at least somewhat curious. Hey, can you tell me a little bit about what you're seeing? Now, they might be angry and aggressive about it, but they might say, hey, can you tell me what it is that you're seeing? And you need to go in there being prepared to be able to show them how this shows up in the workplace. So it might mean that we have 2 or 3 people who are doing similar work. It might mean that we're not exactly sure what the deliverables are and the expectations are for this project, that we're not exactly sure what it is that you're asking of us when it comes to dealing with customers or managing people. And if they say, well, I thought my expectations here were clear when it comes to, let's say, customer engagement, you can say, well, what you gave us doesn't really give us enough understanding of what needs to happen. Can I come back to you with what I think might be useful in terms of how we deal with customer engagement? And then you're entering into a conversation with them. Now, you don't want to be doing their job for them, but you also want to be able to make some kind of offer that supports them in their next level of growth. Because if they can't grow, you can't grow, and you end up having to leave. I've consistently seen that if people come in and make it all about them and how they're pissed off and how they're fed up and how they're not taken care of, rather than a conversation around a missing skill, a missing competence, a missing document, a missing discussion, a missing conversation, most people are willing to at least consider having an additional conversation, producing another document, designing another standard, having a discussion with a team or having a discussion with one other person, and that will move them forward. If that doesn't resolve things, then you absolutely do need to go and ask for help, and it's totally fine to do that. But recognize when you're dealing with a situation where a boss doesn't support you, you've got a breakdown, you've got to decide how it is that you're going to deal with the breakdown. Put yourself in a position where it's not about blame and shame, but where it is much more about, we have a breakdown. Breakdowns happen all of the time. This is something I need to get really good at handling. Let me have the conversation with my boss and see what happens. And in the event that I make absolutely no progress, either because I don't have the skills to do it or because my boss is simply not willing to listen at all, then I need to go and ask for help. So when you're having conversations with a boss about not feeling supported, it's a pretty high stakes game because your boss has the ability to be able to fire you. And we're all aware of that when we're having these difficult conversations. But the thing to remember is your ability to be able to have difficult conversations is really going to be a determinant in your career direction and in your ability to be able to lead and manage. So you either learn how to have some of these conversations or you're constantly in a position where you're asking for help to have them. Now, I'm not recommending that you start off by having this conversation tomorrow. There are lots of different ways to be able to learn how to talk about breakdowns. And some of them are very close to you. So when people start learning about breakdowns for the first time and how to have these conversations around breakdowns and how to walk into a room not needing to be right when they're having the conversation, but that it's an exploration rather than an accusation, I recommend that they have these conversations with friends, that they have these conversations with family members, that they have these conversations with colleagues, rather than having it with your boss out of the gate. a great practice area for learning how to have these kind of conversations where you don't come off as aggressive and blamey, but you come off as curious and exploratory and taking responsibility for whatever your role is in the issue, the problem, the breakdown, is to be able to start having those on a small scale with people who you know, people who have a long level of trust with, and to be able to teach yourself how to be able to have these conversations in a way that is effective. You then eventually work up to having this very difficult conversation with your boss when you feel like you are not being supported. If you feel like you are not ready to have any of these conversations anywhere in your life, then I think you've got another question you need to ask yourself, which is, are people stepping on me? Am I not able to take care of myself? How do I begin to have one of these conversations in a very simple way with someone who I know and trust and like? As you build your capacity to be able to do that, and until you do have people in the organization who are willing to help you. There are HR generalists who work in most organizations, and I have worked very effectively with them and found them to be phenomenal and very caring people. And you can go to those people and you can explain the situation to them without blame, without recriminations, and start investigating with them as to how to be able to deal with this particular situation. They will more than likely either facilitate a conversation between you and your boss with them in the room, or they will actually go and have that conversation with your boss directly and see if there's some leadership training or some coaching or support that your boss needs that might be able to move things forward for you and the rest of the team members. As you get yourself ready for this conversation, are you prepared to ask for help to have this conversation? There's another video that I think will also help you, which is, why are communication skills important in leadership? Dealing with breakdowns is a very important communication skill. So catch this next video, check it out, let me know how it works for you. I wish you the best of luck with this difficult conversation.